So welcome everyone. It's lovely to see some of the names, some of the faces coming up, and I'm really delighted that we've come together tonight. I'm now going to take my picture away. Okay. And tonight is a really big topic. It's one of those topics that really challenges us to make a big shift. And the topic is identity and fear. And as I'll explain a little bit later, the topic came out of a poem that I circulated to a few people 2 or 3 weeks ago. And one of the entry points into this topic could be the question, who am I? You know, many of us have spent 4, 5, in some cases 6 decades in this incarnation. I wonder how often or how much time we have spent reflecting on the question, who am I? But it seems to me that that's a fairly fundamental question, which many hundreds of millions of people never fully address, and certainly don't come up with an adequate answer. So I thought it'd be interesting just to reflect on how we got to where we are right now today. And each one of us, all of us, started out as a fertilized egg. And we spent approximately 40 weeks in utero, some a few more, some a few less. And one of the facts of science is that after between 12 and 14 weeks in utero, we have something called a neural tube, and that closes. And once that closes, we live off the same electromagnetic field as our mother. Essentially, every human being is an electromagnetic field. And so for the next 9 months or so, 8.5 months, we live off exactly the same electromagnetic field as mother. So if she's depressed, that's what we get. If she's happy, that's what we get. If she witnesses a bad car accident, we witness that too. And there's quite a lot goes on in a 9 months pregnancy. And even prior to conception, there are 2 ancestral lines that we inherit. There's the maternal ancestral line that goes back many generations, and there's also the paternal ancestral line. And scientists got very excited in 2003 because they demonstrated that each one of us is affected by 7 generations. The yogis in Southeast Asia had been saying that for about 5,000 years. So we have an influence of our ancestral lines. For some people, it's much more controversial, but you could also say that we have many, many past lives that influence and affect how we are in the current lifetime. So it just goes to show that in the first 9 months of life, quite a lot has happened. And then each one of us has a birth, and we have a very individual birth experience. And over the last sort of 20 to 30 years, there's a lot of research has gone into the effects on our life of a birth experience. And people are understanding more and more that this has quite a profound influence on our identity in this lifetime. And it used to be the case not long ago that experts maintained that when we were born, we were a tabula rasa, a blank slate. They thought that each baby had this innocence and it was a blank slate. But I hope you can see that there's actually quite a lot happening before we come out of the womb. And moving on quite rapidly, probably the person with the single most influence on child development theory was the Swiss psychologist Piaget. And he talked about 4 or 5 stages of development. And it's really the first stage that I'm most interested in tonight. He called the first stage sensory motor. And it was occurring between the age of 0 and 2. And it was during that period that a child learns to differentiate between me and not me. And up until this time, whether it's 18 months or 12 months, psychologists disagree between themselves, the child has no sense of separation between herself or himself and mother, that they exist in what is called a symbiotic union. So at some point in the first 2 years, a child develops me and not me. And that is something all of us take as a given in our daily lives. But that is the creation of separation. Whenever it occurs for the first time in that human life, there is the phenomena of separation. There's me and there's not me. And most of you have probably heard me say before that I feel a strong resonance with the creation story in the Judeo-Christian tradition, where we start out in the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden is a euphemism for oneness. There's no separation. Everyone walks around naked because there's no need to cover up. It's a great metaphor for openness. And then there's a decisive event when there is expulsion from the Garden of Eden. And again, that is the creation of separateness. We are separated from oneness, or we're separated from God. And in many ways, every lifetime, all of us are on an evolutionary journey back to oneness. So that's one possible explanation for the purpose of life. And it's important to remember that oneness is not sameness. Oneness is different from sameness. It doesn't mean that we all have to be the same. And for me, what is happening right now, which Lara touched on and is creating much fear and panic and concern, is really a wake-up call to recognize our deep interconnectedness with everything. We are not separate. Separateness is really an illusion that all of us are conditioned into from about 18 months or whenever. And although we live in many, many different cultures that are radically different, from Turkey, Germany, North Korea, Afghanistan, Iran, England, totally different cultures, but they all have one thing in common. There is this conditioning from an early age that we are separate. There's me and not me. And separateness is the arena, it's the amphitheater of the ego. And one of the things, there's various terminologies that people use. And for the purposes of tonight and generally, I use the term ego, identity, personality, little me as interchangeable. That there's various ways we can refer to this, but it is the sense of my identity over and against everything else. And this was formed and created in the first 2 years of life. And all of us, each one of us on the call, have spent decades crafting our identity through primary school, secondary school, puberty, university, the workplace, relationships, and we're still constantly crafting and shaping our identity, our personality. And we think we have an idea of who we are. And as most of you know, the word personality comes from the Greek word persona, which means mask. It's a mask. And our personality or our identity is the mask with which we meet the world. And it can't be otherwise. We all have a persona. We all have a mask. And that's what we present to the world. And of course, we all know better than anyone else that there's a whole lot more going on within us than the persona that we introduce to the world. And on occasions, we share a bit more of what's behind the mask with selective people. But the major problem of our times is we've become identified with our personality. Most people truly believe that this is who they are. It's really one of life's big illusions. And this is what I refer to as little me. It's the little me that gets slighted, that gets hurt, that gets petty. You know, sometimes when Anna and I were having quite a volatile time, I'd say things and a question arose within me, you know, did I really say that? And the answer is yes, I did. And, you know, little me, or identification with the personality or the identity, is one very inadequate answer to the question, who am I? And unfortunately, 90% of humanity either explicitly or implicitly provide themselves with that answer. We get caught up, and all of us from time to time get caught up in the idea that that is who we are. And identity really, when I say it's an illusion, if you imagine a fan, say, with 4 blades whirling round, if you look at any fan, you see a circle. It's like there's a circle there. But when the fan stops, the circle doesn't exist. And it's exactly the same with identity. If you try to find your identity, or if you go home tonight and you say, right, I'm going to locate or find my ego, you will never find your ego. It doesn't really exist. It's the perception of it that creates the problem. So let's just turn to the idea of fear for a moment, because tonight is all about the relationship between identity and fear. And from my understanding and my experience, all fear, not 99%, but 100% of fear originates from the identity. It originates from the ego. So you could have a fear of not being successful enough. You could have a fear of not being thin enough, not being clever enough, a fear of rejection, a fear of abandonment, a fear of not being enough, a fear of never being enough, a fear of dying, a fear of not living. The list is endless. But whatever the fear is, the fear originates from the idea of identity or little me. The deeper reality for all of us is you cannot be rejected. We all know what it's like to feel rejection, to feel exclusion. But what feels rejected and what feels excluded is our sense of identity. And the more attached we are to the identity, the bigger the hurt. And so as we grow beyond identity, which is a lifetime process, actually we realize that if somebody behaves badly towards us, if somebody seeks to reject us, it's more about them than it is about us. And that actually, when I'm in touch with the truth of who I really am, it's impossible to reject me. You can't abandon me. You can't hurt me. And I want to read to you, I printed it out, the poem that gave rise to this evening. So this was a poem by Khalil Gibran, who some of us encountered in the 70s and 80s. He was very fashionable. And the poem is called Fear. And it goes as follows. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages. And in front of her, she sees an ocean so vast that to enter, there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no way back. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. And the reason I think that is so powerful is, in fact, right now, why don't each one of us, I want you just to close your eyes if it's appropriate, but you don't have to. And I want you to imagine that you are a river or a droplet of rain. It doesn't matter which. And imagine now that you are disappearing into the ocean. Just imagine you're a river flowing into the ocean, or a single drop of rain that falls into the ocean. And as you imagine that, what arises? And of course, none of you can speak, but in my experience, I've never met anyone who doesn't feel fear arise. The idea that you're a river or drop of rain and you flow into the ocean and you cease to exist. And what ceased to exist is little me. And the root of all separation, all misery, all suffering is this idea of needing to defend the identity, needing to defend the ego. And the paradox is that fear arises from the ego. And then every time fear arises, it reinforces the ego. It reinforces my sense of this is who I am. And what the identity does is, Lara Farah's is not Anna Pasternak. Anna Pasternak is not Victoria Fuller. That there's this sense of separate identity. But when we become the ocean, there's the possibility of becoming love. There's the possibility of becoming life itself. The possibility of becoming so totally expansive, the experience is actually infinitely more satisfying than any possibility of any identity. But it requires us to give up little me, to give up the identity we've been crafting, we've been building, and we've been attaching to for many decades. And that's why it's so difficult. But the challenge for each one of us right now is to stand at the precipice and say, are we willing to give up little me? Are we ready to let go of defending who it is we think we are? Because if we truly understood the notion of interconnectedness, it would be impossible to harm each other. It would be impossible to harm the planet. Imagine for a moment that you are the ocean. Would you pour a jug of toxic chemicals into yourself? Of course not. So each time we harm or hurt anyone else with a word, with a blow, with an insult, with a rejection, we're really only harming ourselves. And people all through history, wise women and men, have been telling us this, but it's never really landed. And occasionally, as could be the case tonight, it lands in an intellectual sense. We say, yeah, no, I think I understand that. And we create a concept out of it. And that is very different from the experience of being willing to give up the identity. And many of us on this call have experienced that giving up in a number of different ways, in meditation, in yoga, in Tai Chi, and sometimes in hobbies, sometimes in making love, sometimes there's a range of ways, sometimes in play. There's a range of ways in which we can talk about losing ourselves. Sometimes those of us that are parents in relation to children, particularly watching our children sleep or something, we just fall into the ocean where we experience ourselves as this profound, deep sense of love or this deep sense of expansiveness. And the challenge right now, if you look around the world, there is this massive epidemic of fear. And the fear all originates from little me. What will happen to me? And actually, little me doesn't exist. It's an artificial construct that we've been creating and other people have been reinforcing for a long, long time. And we don't need to jump off the precipice in one go. This is an iterative process that many of us on this call, all of us on this call in some sense, have been moving towards this evolutionary shift. And whatever is happening now, whether it's the virus, whether it's the strategy to manipulate and control, whatever is happening is designed to wake us up and get us to a point where we say, I've had enough of that little petty me that are causing me so much suffering and misery and other people suffering and misery. So that's the challenge. And I don't think any of us are there fully, but I suspect that every single one of us on this call have experienced it in fleeting moments and have a desire for more of it. So I think that's why I'm going to stop, Lara, and invite questions.
Okay, just before, while everybody is typing their questions, you can either type or ask me to speak to Andrew by typing to me. And to do that, you go on the chat at the bottom. Andrew, when you live, obviously, this resonates with a lot of us, what you're saying. Every one of us has, as you said, dipped in and out of this feeling of understanding this concept of little me and my higher self, and how fed up we are of this little me making us live so much suffering. we live in a world where this would be ideal if everyone would be willing to understand that. But the world we live in, I mean, very few people, if you actually talk about this to many people, they'll think you're completely crazy. And they don't apply that. I know you always said to me that I can't worry about what others do and I have to focus on my attitude. What I find difficult is to keep coming back to this because the more you feel you dip into this, the more lonely you feel. This is how I'm feeling anyway. I feel very lonely at the moment because around me, very few people, especially now, because around me are just 6 people. This loneliness and this lack of hope that more people will be open to even understand this concept. I don't know if my question makes sense to you or...
Yeah, no, I think it makes perfect sense. And I would be surprised if everyone on the call has not from time to time experienced that same thing. And that's one of the reasons why we create these gatherings, we connect up with each other, we support each other. The fact is, I would say to you, be crazy. It's like, of course, if you walk into a tribe in a new city and everyone's got pink hair and long earrings and 3 arms, you would feel the odd one out. And most people, not all people, but most people would set about doing what they need to do to fit in, because the desire to fit in is very strong. The desire to belong is very strong. And all of us in our lives have experienced that thing where we give up our center and we join the crowd. And I've done that all my life. I think I'm very fortunate in that I would say that 90% of the people in my life that I come in contact with, I have the same conversation, because actually most people I know in one form or another, and even if they're not, I just share my truth. And so that's what we're being called to do. And if people think you're crazy, be crazy. Or if people don't want to be your friend anymore because they think you're a bit sick, then that's one of the consequences. But this is evolution, and in any evolutionary shift in any species, it's always a very small number that lead the evolutionary change. And that's just a reality that the herd, the 90%, follow on after. And there's no superiority implied in that whatsoever, because we're all here to live the life we're living. Yeah. But Lara, right now, you're surrounded by friends. You're surrounded by people that want to connect with you, that feel connected to you. So it's up to you. You can either go up into little me and complain that you feel lonely or disconnected, or you can drop down and feel the truth, feel the reality of that deep connection with a lot of people. It's there all the time.
Yeah, I think what it is this attachment to some specific people.
Yeah,
I want to access. I think it just came to me. It's of course I know I'm surrounded by people. I think it's this little me attaching to that idea, probably, that's causing me this pain anyway in my personal example. It's just that it's so nice to be able to talk to you all about it, because we just we understand each other. We can just even agree to disagree on things. It's not one truth. I got that, but anyhow, it is what it is, isn't it?
And it's a universal experience. There's nobody that hasn't had the experience of being rejected or excluded or lonely. It's just part of life.
Yeah. If anyone would like to share something or ask a question to Andrew, please let me know. I can't see you all, so don't wave. Just write a message on the bottom right, please. And if you don't, maybe.
If we don't, we carry on talking about fear.
Yeah. Fear. It just comes and goes. But anyway, and I have a question here. It's hold on one second. So it's somebody wanting to be right and trying to discipline a 9-year-old in the correct way. So I think it's just sharing what's happening at the moment with the homeschooling, I guess.
Yeah. And first of all, I don't think there is a correct way to discipline a 9-year-old. I think if we opened up the conversation to this group, we'd come to blows fairly quickly about what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. But the reality is that the current situation puts enormous strain on the vast majority of people, if not everyone. I feel incredibly fortunate every day because I live in a country, in a beautiful place, in a big house, and relatively to most people, we have a very easy and enjoyable experience. But I can honestly say every day I have the thought that if I lived in a high-rise block in Peckham with 3 rooms and 3 children, I would be wanting to kill myself or someone else pretty quickly. So, there is a reality to the strain that this lockdown is putting under us. And even, beautiful people in big houses often feel like killing their spouses from time to time. So the reality is that any stress or any strain is always an opportunity to shift. You've heard me say many times, the greatest catalyst for change is crisis. And to some extent, we're in a collective crisis. So whether it's an individual crisis, I often say that I could give you the names and the telephone numbers of 30 people who had cancer, and they would all say it was the best thing that ever happened to them. And when they were going through chemo and vomiting and losing their hair, they would never have said that.
Yeah.
So when we're under stress, when we're under strain, sometimes it's a day at a time, sometimes it's an hour at a time. There's very real pressures, and I'm not seeking to minimize those pressures. But there's an opportunity, something individually and collectively needs to shake us out of this hypnosis we're in. There's a collective hypnosis. You know, every morning until now, 3 or 4 million people walked over London Bridge and went into little cubicles and pressed buttons, and they think this is perfectly normal. Yeah. It's a hypnosis. The world we've created is causing immeasurable harm to us all, and it's not sustainable. And even knowing that, most of us don't shift. So often it's the pain of the suffering. When it gets intolerable enough, we let go of it. And most of us had that experience where you're, you know, in a trigger of something, you let go of it, and then you can't get it back if you try to. So there's many different things, and I would not want to minimize the strain or the stress for some people right now. And I think all of us feel that at different times of the day. But equally, you can then move beyond that, fall into a deeper connection with yourself, feel the connection to others, and nothing has changed other than our own internal experience, and that changes everything.
So just to come back to the example you said of the little me, so this wanting to discipline this 9-year-old and put...
Hang on, we lost you, Lara. Hello? I can't hear you, Lara.
Oh, I said, does it fall in the little me scenario to want to change the mannerism and educate this 9-year-old the way we wanted to?
Well, again, it's a very it's a nuanced question, because you don't, if you're a parent and you have a 9-year-old or a 5-year-old or 11-year-old, you know, you are the adult, they are a child, and you have responsibilities to create boundaries and to, you know, you don't want an out of control adult or child or anyone. So there is a responsibility. The loving thing to do is to create boundaries. But there's a difference between coming from a place of love and coming from a place of control or punishment or anger or rage. When we come from anger or rage, as we all do as parents, I challenge anyone not to, that's when we're reacting to something in us which is to do with little me. When we're setting appropriate and loving boundaries, because we all need boundaries, then that's a different kind of experience. And it's a challenge. Yeah.
Victoria would like to talk to you, so I'm going to find her name and unmute her.
No, Laura, I sent you a message to say no, I didn't.
So. Oh, sorry, I didn't get to that one.
No. Consciously, you might not want to, but unconsciously, if you were to know, what is the question?
No, it was really just building on Lara's point. I'm not feeling any fear at the moment. In fact, I'm controversial in that I'm loving every moment of this at the moment. There's very few people I could say this to. I feel I can sort of whisper it in this group. I'm feeling I'm championing or not championing. I'm happy that the virus has come to give us this message. I feel I'm in danger of losing friends, family, possibly even clients, because I am starting to speak up about a lot of stuff that I've been wanting to say for a long time, which I feel good, but to Lara's point, I then feel lonely, and that I'm everyone thinks I'm slightly bonkers, and so there's this sort of dance going on between finally stepping up and speaking up and trying to be heard, but then moments where I guess little me comes back in and just is like, you're not making a difference, so you just need to be quiet again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's beautifully put. I mean, that's the challenge for all of us.
Yeah. I have here something saying, my worry is obviously for our children, and that we are not being told the truth. There is so much out there that we are not being told. ?
You see, the greatest gift to our children And it's a great question, because now more than at any other time in history, we've relied for hundreds of years and longer on external truth. You know, for a long time, it was the church or the mosques or religion adopted dogma that was the external truth. And then there was secularism and science. And we have this sort of habitual compulsion to look for truth outside of ourselves. And there was a brilliant book in the 1960s that was entitled, "If You Meet the Buddha on the Road, Kill Him." And now, I've been saying this for about 20, 30 years, but we have to give up the reliance on external truth. And now more than ever, there's about 5 or 6 or more competing narratives. We're definitely not getting the truth. In one sense, we never have. And I've always argued that in one sense, living in England or Italy or Spain or Germany is more dangerous than living in North Korea. Because at least if you're in North Korea, everybody knows that it's propaganda. Everybody knows that it's not really. You know, whereas here, we think it's a mirror image. It's the macro version of the micro version of our attachment to our identity. We think if it's on the BBC, if it's in the Times newspaper, if everybody's talking about it, it must be true. And again, we're getting caught up in external truth. So now more than ever, what we need to do is to connect deeply with ourselves and find our own truth. And some of us are out of practice with that. But I literally, if I listen to something, if I read something, I watch myself and see if it resonates with me, with my body. And most of us have had this experience. Animals have it intuitively much better than we do. So we have to discover what's true for us. And Victoria's truth might be different to my truth, might be different to Anna's truth, and that's fine. But exactly as Victoria said, whatever our truth is, let's stand up and speak our truth before it's too late. Mm. Look at what happened in the late 1930s, early 40s. When you look back into it and you saw what happened and you saw the level of passivity and the level of acquiescence, you can't quite believe it, but that's what happens. And history, time and time again, has repeated itself. So it's just another example of, are there enough people to stand up and speak their truth? And there's a wonderful example of this today or yesterday. I've only been told about it. I haven't witnessed it directly. But the tennis player, Novak Djokovic, stood up and said, "I would rather retire from tennis and give up tennis than be vaccinated as a prerequisite for staying on the tour." And you know, I almost had tears in my eyes because I thought, it doesn't matter whether he's right or wrong. There is no right or wrong. It's a very powerful example of someone speaking their truth. That's his truth. Yeah. And that's what more of us need to be doing, rather than worrying, will she like me if I say that? Will he like me? Will I fit in? Will they invite me to the dinner party? Will I get an invite to his birthday? Will they invite me to the south of France again? Blah, 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 blah. Because that doesn't get us anywhere.
Or will I sound stupid if I say that, for example?
Yeah, you definitely will. Be stupid.
There is one thing. Does losing your identity mean you become extremely vulnerable? Doesn't it cause more fear?
The exact opposite. Losing your identity, you become absolutely, you really become omnipotent. You become so strong because you can't be hurt. You can't be rejected. You can't be hurt. You can't be abandoned. You know, can anybody harm love? Love is love. And actually, you know, it sounds trite. It's been said many times, but there is no problem so great that love cannot overcome it. The light is always stronger than the darkness. So it's really, we think, and the mind and the ego says, if we give up, we'll become weak, we'll become vulnerable. But it's the opposite. Look at people like Gandhi. Look at people like Nelson Mandela. Look at people like Jesus, Buddha. You know, there's actually a lot of women and men on the planet doing extraordinary things. Look at the people on the front line right now. They're not worried about their identity. They're giving themselves to the collective. And there's immense strength in that. And of course...
Sorry, Andrew.
No, you go.
It has a very great comment here, because it's to talk about your truth when so many people are in fear around you. Like Victoria said, I just understand fully what Victoria said. She doesn't feel any fear at all. And I dip in and out of this feeling as well. I only go back to fear when I let myself, completely be taken by the news, by friends around me who text me all the worst case scenario that you could imagine about the outcome of what we're living. And it's so, for me, I'm sure for many, especially this friend who just sent this comment, it's so hard to speak your truth when it nearly sounds arrogant to others, like you as I said before, you either look like you're arrogant. I know you answered that it doesn't matter how we look as long as we speak our truth. But
see, again, that's a good point, Lara, because arrogance, 100% of arrogance is always a compensation for inadequacy. And there are times when we fall into arrogance. But when you speak your truth, as Victoria just did, I've heard you, Lara, you speak your truth. It doesn't matter what you're saying, it's authoritative. And it's never arrogant. It's just saying that's where I am right now.
Yeah.
If you go into any room of people and there's someone speaking their truth, you will energetically feel drawn towards it. If they're in some persona, some fake identity, you will feel repelled by it.
Someone's concern would be that once this lockdown and virus situation is past, they won't want to revert to the old ways, and they seem to enjoy their solitude and cherish it. And the worry is, will they become a recluse once this is?
Well, it's much easier to stay in your center as a recluse than it is to engage with life and to engage with loved ones and engage with family. And again, we all have we're all somewhere different on the spectrum in terms of socialization and quiet time. I have to say that along with a lot of other people, I have welcomed the quiet time. I've welcomed the time alone for more reflection, more inner inquiry. And if you find yourself continuing with that, so be it. There's no wrong or right. And a lot of the socialization that goes on is a little bit empty. It can be fantastic. You can get together with friends and have the most amazing time. But a lot of it is a little bit hollow. So it's finding what works for you, and it's finding it's really, in a sense, the question every day is what and who allows me to feel more connected with myself. There's some people, when you meet them, when you have a cup of tea with them, when you share a meal with them, you leave and you feel much more connected with yourself. There's other people you feel the opposite. You feel drained. You feel slightly jagged. And for me in my life, I over the last 10 years, I've made conscious decisions not to be around certain people so much and to spend time with people that invite me into a deeper relationship with myself.
I have a friend from Monaco that would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Or maybe share a comment. Her name is Masha.
She wants to invite me onto her yacht, does she?
Maybe.
The answer is yes.
Masha? Where is she? I have to find her to unmute her once. Yeah. Sorry, Andrew. It's I have to go through the list. Well, obviously, she can't talk because here she is.
What's her name?
Masha, you're unmuted. You can talk. Oh, I can't hear her. I don't know why. She's not on mute. Sorry, Masha. You're unmuted, but I still can't hear you. If you can write maybe the question, I'm really sorry. Doesn't work. Okay, I don't know why. There is a difference between ego and identity. Defining as synonymous can be misleading, somebody's saying.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. As I said, for the purpose of this evening, I'm using them interchangeably. But of course, we can agree that there's differences, and we can then debate what those differences might be. But it really, for me, there is this little me that encompasses all of this, and it's how we break out of that. And in English, there is a certain problem with language and sentence structure because English is constructed like many other languages, but not all languages, with a subject, a verb, and an object. So we say, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And it implies that it's my love. It's like, I have something called love and I love you. Whereas in fact, the truth is that love is flowing through me towards you. It's not my love. It's not mine. It's not me. It's I'm experiencing love for you. The love is flowing through me towards you. And I think other languages express that much better than English.
Yeah. Andrew, how do you prevent your internal fears setting into the character of your child or children?
Well, to some extent, the answer might be you can't. But I suppose another answer would be is to be honest about your fear. Because what we tend to do as parents is conceal certain emotions, conceal certain thoughts, conceal certain things that we think our children are not ready to know. And of course, there are some things that are inappropriate to tell your children. But children, like animals, have a better truth recognition program than adults do. So if you're saying to a child, I'm not frightened, the child knows you're lying. So it's better to share your fear and say, sometimes mummy feels frightened, sometimes daddy feels frightened, sometimes I feel vulnerable, sometimes. And what I do when I feel fear is this. And with fear, let's just deal with this. There's really, as far as I can see, there's only two options if you're feeling fear. You either literally drop into the center of it, you allow yourself to connect more with the epicenter of the fear. So you literally like bring it on. And it's counterintuitive to do that. But if you learn to do that, and if you practice doing that, whether it's fear or jealousy or whatever it is, you will find that you drop into it. It's very intense for about 30 seconds and then it's gone. So you literally allow the fear. Sometimes when I get onto an aeroplane, I sit down and I feel this massive amount of fear just pass through me. Because there's a collective fear and it's also my own individual fear, but it's gone. So that's one thing to do. The other option is to slightly create a gap where you witness it. So you step back from the fear a bit. You don't try and get rid of it. You don't try and repress it. You don't try and deny it, but you look it in the face and you say, hello, old friend. I know you. It's like an old jumper with holes in. That's your fear. I'm just going to choose something else for the moment. So although the fear is there, you actually make a different choice.
Okay. I just would like to pass on to Maya to you. She'd like to ask you directly a question.
Great.
Maya.
Hi Maya.
Everyone. Andrew, the question was actually about the fear. It was me. How can you say your truth when you have people around you that are so scared because they do feel unsafe if they get to know that their governments, the people that they put in power, are telling them the lies. And I'm finding it extremely difficult for me to say my truth without stressing myself. So I'm actually enjoying, like Victoria, like Lara, like many of us, this incubation period, because it's a time for me to go within and also see both sides. Because I tend to see just one side. We all tend to see just one side, but it's like, how can one say their truth, but without encountering in a way like lots of resistance, or do we just let it go and leave it? It's about
It's a great question, and what I would do in a situation like that is to simply share. I can see the possibility of going into fear, and I've certainly had some fear about the possible future events. But what I say is I can see the possibility of going into that fear, but actually, when I connect more with myself, I have an inner knowing that there's something stronger than the fear, and that what's happening is in service to the evolutionary thrust. So the thing about fear, that's one part of it. The other part of it is if somebody is lying to you, or if there's an authority figure, whether it's a father, a husband, a state, they only ever have power over you if you acquiesce to it.
Sorry, Andrew. I'm asking because it's like, how do you yourself say your truth when you have people around you who are so scared. So for them, they will not listen to the truth. You just let it go.
Just let it go. If they, there's not one truth. And
yeah, of course, we know that. Yeah.
Your truth or my truth, it is not, different to anyone else's truth. But if somebody is really in the fear, of course, I would invite them to move beyond the fear. But if they don't want to, and if that's their dominant way of being, then it's fine. It's really about moving on to somebody who is more open to the truth that you're speaking. And it's like we've been saying all evening. You stand up and speak your truth. Some people will move away from you, and some people will move towards you. You can't really ask for anything more.
Yeah.
But it's as we all know, it's very, very satisfying, even in a family, in a small family group, when we suddenly find our voice and say something we've been putting off. It's very liberating. It's very empowering to say, I'm not saying I'm right, but this is my truth.
Mm.
And that's part of the waking up experience. I mean, if you go back to India, it's just a good example. There's many examples. India was under the dominance of the UK, and everyone acquiesced with that. And, we built railways and we did various other things. And, it started with one diminutive little man that stood up to that and said, no, we want to empower ourselves and we want to control our own destination. And he defeated the British Army without an army. Immense power, just by speaking his truth and attracting other people towards him. And that's what we need on the planet right now. We need people like Gandhi, people like Nelson Mandela, that came out of 27 years of incarceration and started talking about forgiveness. Extraordinary. And there must have been lots of people who were angry with him, who said, no, we want revenge. I'm sure I would have been queuing up saying, no, I want revenge. So all you can do is speak your truth. And those that want to listen will listen, and those that shun you will shun you.
Thank you.
It's somebody very special's birthday tomorrow. Happy birthday, Maya.
Thank you.
Love you. Love you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think we're sort of almost there, Lara.
Yeah, we're almost there. And I just want to thank you so much, Andrew. I know it's not easy for many of us, this technology thing. And I really appreciate the effort you're putting into getting used to this. And I really like it because so many people from Lebanon and Monaco and now finally can join these circles. So it's great. Maybe we can continue this later while we are maybe all together. We can still put you on Zoom for those who are not around.
I'm once again, I'm looking forward to the virtual supper of lamb and smoked salmon.
And guess what? This amazing person who does all these wonderful supper is listening to you today. For once, she's not busy. So Noha is here with us, and I'm so happy she could also listen to you in directly. So it's great.
Yeah, she's a genius with food.
Yes.
I've asked in many, many different countries, I've asked chefs, what's the most important ingredient in your kitchen? And a lot of them say salt and they say different things. But the reality is the most important ingredient in anyone who's preparing food is love.
Yes.
You can absolutely tell when someone has prepared a meal with love, or whether it's it looks perfect and it's perfectly positioned on the plate, but it's kind of lacking something.
Absolutely. And
it's the same. It's the same with every activity.
Yeah. So thank you, Noha, and thank you, Andrew. So we'll see you next month, hopefully.
Wonderful.
And thank you all. Love you all, and be safe. Bye.
Thank you, Lara. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.